Hey there, NPCs. Welcome to Rules of Cool, where we interview very special guests, creators, gamers, designers, and world builders. I'm your host, Rem, and today we'll be chatting with Andrew J. Lucas, writer and producer of industry defining IPs like Star Trek. We have a fantastic giveaway of PDF copies of two of the Fractal Visions books. Type hashtag RemPC in the chat for a free entry to win. The drawing will be done at the end of today's episode of the Emerald Glitch, coming up right after Rules of Cool. You can also get bonus entries by donating bits or subscribing. Every 100 bits gets you a bonus entry, and subscribing gets you 7 whole bonus entries. Now, in Rem Alternis news, Exit Vector is the aerial combat minis game coming to Kickstarter. Give your pilots some much-deserved attention as you use this rules-light game on its own or as part of your cyberpunk role-playing game. Get your rigor on with Exit Vector and follow the link in chat to check on the project. Don't forget to enter your email. Now, Well of the Worlds is coming to Kickstarter from Mobius Worlds Publishing. Powered by Prowlers and Paragon's Ultimate Edition, this TTRPG setting transports characters into a new fantasy world where they discover they have powers they didn't have in their home world. Inspired by Japanese isekai portal fantasies, this is a world of adventure for you to explore. Learn more by visiting the link in chat and following the project. In the world of Shadowrun Takedown, power is everything. Will you rise as a Shadowrunner or fall prey to the corporate web? Gear up for an epic tabletop board game like no other. Join us on Kickstarter starting July 25th and secure your spot in the shadows. Now it's time to get right into our conversation for this week, so stay tuned, RemPCs. All right, welcome back, everyone, and welcome to you, Andrew. How are you?
Pretty good, pretty good. Struggling through a bit of a heat wave. My office is a little hot, so if I look a little sweaty, that's what's going on here.
I just assumed you were nervous.
Yeah, well, a little bit, not that much.
Don't be. It's very chill here. I'm really excited to have you on. We talked a little on Facebook, so I'm excited to get to know you a little bit better and some of your work. But I like to start every interview off with the same question, which is, what is your history as a gamer?
As a gamer, wow.
Monopoly? That could be the answer.
A little bit. Everyone starts with Monopoly. I would say as a real gamer, it would be Dungeons and Dragons Edition 1 back in the 70s. So that's where I started. That's where I got my love of it. That's where me and my Air Cadet friends in Vernon, BC, Canada, it's where we developed our, I don't know, lifelong love of the role-playing games and that kind of stuff.
I see a lot of, I mean, yes, I bring gamers onto this show, but like the jump from role playing game to storytelling, to writer is like, that's an arc you can expect. Like sometimes I'll have someone on and they're like, yeah, I was a captain in the army and I did all this sports stuff growing up, and it's like, when did you start writing? I don't understand where it came from.
Oh, yeah, agreed. Role-playing games as a dungeon master or as a player, they're interactive. They make you tell the stories, and then the stories make you become involved in it. If you have a little bit of a talent and a little bit of a love of writing, whether it's poetry, whether it's fiction, whether it's screenplays, this is going to drive it. It's going to bring it out of you. It's going to help you develop those skills. And then if you do have the skill and you do have the discipline, you can move that into, producing fiction that other people want to read, producing games that other people want to play.
That's awesome. So going starting as a gamer, how did you first get into writing?
It would have been around 1981, 79, around there. Jesus, I am so old. But I had a English teacher, and he was giving us the tasks and stuff like that, and he was merciless. I wrote a very, very derivative story with a lot of story drawn from Highland Starship Troopers, and he just ripped it apart. And every time I did something different and changed it, I realized that, this is something that I can do. This is something I can enjoy. And then, I started focusing on that. And it's like I started writing stories, I started writing poetry. When I went to college, I started taking creative writing courses. And then at that point, I realized that this is something I like. I won a couple of contests, had some things published. And to me, it felt like everything else that I was doing is going to be to provide, the money, the resources, the security to be able to write. And that's where my career developed, outside of writing. Moving through call center work, moving into government work, moving with the telephone company. That's the security. Not that I don't have a passion for my day job, because I do. Um, but it's all to provide me the time and the energy to do what I love, which is writing. Yeah, and occasionally, interact with my wife and child.
Oh, I feel those feels. I was explaining to someone recently that I have three jobs, and they were like, "What? You can't take on a fourth?" I was like, "Oh, my fourth is my husband and my dogs."
Mm,
And they were like, "Well, that's not a job." I was like, "Yeah, but I have to schedule time for them, or it doesn't happen."
yeah, of course. Yeah, you have to do that, and sometimes you have to take on more than you can handle, and you just have to get it done. There was a time where I had my own business, moving from the phone company to the provincial government. And I ran my own business making miniature carrying cases. And I was selling these directly to Games Workshop. And they were a huge success, but I knew that it would be a limited success because Games Workshop was very clear in saying that we want your product, we want to license your product. You can do your own stuff on the side, but this is probably going to be a limited time until we start making your own. And I can't compete with Games Workshop, but I sure as heck sold 500 or 500,000 cases to them. And that's
Wow.
that's that's one of the things that I've always enjoyed, is that I was able to do that. And seeing your product, whether it's a case, whether it's a book, whether it's a fan film screenplay, if you see it in the wild, it just gives you such pleasure knowing that someone is enjoying it, someone's using it, someone has gone out of their way to find something that you made. And you're experiencing that now too, that you can see people enjoying the things that you do. And when someone comes up to me and says, I played your adventure and I really enjoyed it, or even I played your adventure and this is what I hated about it, I love all of that, because they are, yeah, yeah, because they are involved, they are passionate. And one of the best books, which the late Nigel Finley called my journeyman work, was the Street Fighter role players handbook, the player's handbook. And I have always seen that as one of my triumphs. And I always hear about one rule that I broke when I made it. And it's an interesting story. Um, White Wolf came to Nigel and said, we would like you to be involved in this. And he said, there is no way I'm going to write anything for Street Fighter. And in our weekly writers, drinking, we'd go down, we just, shoot the shit with what we're talking about and what we're writing, what our projects are. He gave me this package, right? He said, look what White Wolf wants me to write. And I said, Man, I love Street Fighter. I could do that. And he goes, great. I'll put a good word in for you. And that's where it was my second book, but it was my journeyman book. And so I started working with Ken Cliff on that. He was a new editor. He took a risk with me and he said, I need this done. And you have 30 days to do it. And it's like 35,000 words. Or sorry, yeah, 35,000 words. And he needed that within 30 days. And it was a trial and it was hard. There was zero play testing because it was brand new and nobody had the original books except for, printouts that I had. And this was all pre-internet. So my second Gen Con that I went to, I had my manuscript on a floppy disk, gave it to Ken Cliff. We went over the hard copy, and I gotta say, I was so drunk for that editing session in the morning. But that's how Gen Con works. You meet the people, you talk to the people, you sign the deals. And if you have to go over edits with Ken Cliff in a shady diner in Vegas in the morning after you've been up for 3 hours and you're still drunk, it's what you do.
That's incredible. Oh, I'm so glad. We for our audience, Andrew and I were talking before the show, and I was explaining how I feel like I'm talking at him because I want to hear all the stories, but I don't want to, cheat you guys of hearing the stories. But it's stuff like this we're hearing, like you and Ken getting together, or you and Nigel, who's
Yeah.
a Shadowrun writing legend, like to be able to like think of these writers sitting in a bar just like being served by a bartender that has no clue of the brilliance around him. I love that image. I'm like, oh boy, tell me more.
Oh, we had a beautiful little writing group in the mid 90s, and it was Nigel Finley. He was like the old man of the group. There was myself, that was the young punk. There was Lisa Smedman, Nicole Lindros, Mark Frine, a couple others that came through. We would always be talking about the projects we're working on, giving each other's advice, banging off plot lines and stories. And then we put together our own little magazine, Adventures Unlimited, and I think we went like five issues of that. And it was
Wow.
such a nice dynamic. And then that would be every Thursday down at Stamps Landing, False Creek in Vancouver. And then every Sunday, we would go into our role-playing games. And we had an Ars Magica campaign that went on for, it's got to say, like 5-10 years. And it was like
Wow.
Nigel, Nicole, myself, a few other local gamers and stuff like that. It was just so much fun. So much fun.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And then every now and then we'd LARP down at the bars. Yeah.
That's so cool. Oh, I love it. I love
Yeah.
that. The nerdism crossing nerdist culture. I love that. Oh, that's so cool. All right. I could listen to more of this and just let you go, but I have specific questions I must ask.
Shoot.
So as you got into so you talked about how you got into writing. What about like content production? Because you've also in addition to everything you've said you've done already, including making cases for Games Workshop, which that
Mm.
I did not expect that. What about content production?
Um, so producing content for the role-playing game industry it's both easy and it's both hard. You kind of have to know what you're doing. So if I'm comfortable with a system like Robotech or Palladium or Dungeons and Dragons, I'll reach out to the publishers and I'll see what they're looking for. Also, if I don't know the system, I'll do the same thing and I'll see what they need, what they're looking for. And in most cases, I will have a broad idea, I'll have a plot line that I have in mind, or they will have something specific. So when I used to work with DreamPod 9 with Mark Alexi and that team back in the 90s, I gotta say, they would say, I need this book and this is what I'm looking for. and they will give me an outline, and it'll be a table of contents. It will have every section, every subsection, and then it'll have a word count. So it's really just making a puzzle and just filling it all in. And then they'll have some secret meta stuff that I'm not allowed to talk about. And it would just be fill in the blanks, put in what you need, put in what makes sense, and then have everything covered. Not every publisher is that well organized. Other ones will look for you to come forward with something. So if you have an idea for a scenario, and for new writers out there, be organized. Have an idea what your word count's going to be, what your plot points are, and what your plot tree is. For adventure writing, I always make a plot tree, which is basically you're starting here, and these are the options and the areas that you want to go. So it actually looks like a flow chart. And then you start filling in what those mean. So what are the NPCs in this area going to experience, and where is it going to go from there? The last thing you want to do is make something linear, because the players will notice that, the DM will notice that, and nobody wants to be railroaded. Nobody wants to go into an adventure and not have options. They want to be able to branch out, that kind of stuff. I felt like I was rambling there. Did I answer the question?
That was great. Honestly, I'm a visual person, so I really liked the explanation of the flowchart of choices, because I've never been able to calm my mind down enough to write. I think where it's like I'll sit down and I'll try to write, and then my brain has gone through 15 thoughts before I could write down one.
Yeah.
And so I shouldn't say this on the internet. I'll phrase it this way. I could dictate. I could not I could not write. But I think like that flowchart idea of the choices that are made, like what if they do this? What if they don't do this? What if they do this? What if they don't do this? And the consequences of those, like I could see how that functions and flows a little better. And maybe I would only have 8 thoughts running through my mind instead of 15 if I was trying to write that.
And that's the thing. If you're doing the writing, you want to be able to capture those thoughts. So this is what I do, and it's going to be different for everyone. But I carry this with me, so it's always in my pocket, and those are my main characters for the story that I'm writing now. And every time I have a thought, I'm adding to it and changing things around. So, for instance, the project I'm working on now. It's going to be my first novel, and I'm doing it for World of Game Design. I'm about a third of the way into it, so I'm significantly further behind than I want to be. But it's a survival adventure in the future in a space station orbiting the moon. So the amount of research that I've been putting into it is significant, because right now there's a lot of things happening with the moon, with Artemis, with the return, with the lunar gateway, and everything seems to be changing. And then I'm pushing it forward 100, 200 years into the future. And then I'm throwing my main characters onto the lunar surface. And that's brand new. If I throw them into a jungle, if I throw them into a city, if I do anything in the future on Earth, I kind of know what's going to happen. On the moon, I got to learn some stuff. So as I'm walking or going about my day, and I have an idea, like for instance, lunar rover breaks down. How are we going to fix that? That kind of stuff. I get an idea that the main characters, one of the engineers needs to make a part using a 3D printer. I write that down. What are the resources going to be? What are the issues? What is this character's feelings towards being an engineer? Very meticulous. It needs to be perfect, it needs to work. But the other characters say, does it? We just need to go this far. So why are you working the problem so hard that the items you're putting together through the 3D printer are going to last 100 years? They need to last a week. That kind of stuff. Those are the things that I put in the notes, because that's what's in my head at the moment. And I know if I leave it for a half hour, that's gone. and
Yeah.
that whole plot is missed. So being a
Yeah.
writer, you want to capture those thoughts. You want to keep your notes. They don't have to be clear. I know often my notes are going to be 1 or 2 words, and it will remind me that this is what I'm thinking about. So if I put 3D printer regolith, I know exactly what I'm talking about.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, interesting. One of the things that I do love about gamers is that most of us have real life day jobs, right? And so you find people with a variety of talents and skills that you didn't know about. Our former GM for Emerald Glitch, which comes on right after this, is an astrophysicist for NASA. He worked on Artemis,
Nice.
and is a gamer. So if you want to pick his brain anytime, let me know. I'll connect you.
Well,
um,
World of Game Design, the publisher, he's a NASA scientist. So
oh,
yeah,
oh,
and
I didn't know that. How neat.
well, I don't know him that well as an employee of NASA, but I know him for about 20 years now as a publisher. And I've written for him a number
Cool.
of times, and I quite love him as a person and as a publisher. And that kind of loyalty goes a long way over the course of years. There are people
Yeah.
that I've written for over the years that I have never asked for money for, and I have never wanted money for. Like Jonathan Thompson that just passed. I have written for him, and I'm going to dearly miss not writing for him. 1 or 2 things a year. And I'm going to
Oh,
miss that, but I have never wanted him to pay me. I have always wanted him to get what he needs, what he wants, because I enjoy working with him and I don't need
oh,
the money. But it was sad to hear him pass, and I'm really happy that his brother is carrying on.
yeah.
I want to continue to be involved with that. But him coming to me and saying,
Sure.
"Hey, I I'm going to a convention and I need a adventure to run for Robotech, and I want it to be kind of like this. So can you give me, like 2,000 words?" And it's like,
Yeah.
yes. And then I give him 10.
Oh,
Yeah.
like writers do.
As writers do. I'm constantly overwriting, but there's the things that strike my fancy. I will just reach out to the publisher and say, "Would you like this?" And they'll say, "Well, I can't pay you for that." And it's like, didn't ask. There's
Oh,
there's a company, I forget the name, but they had a Kickstarter for a racing board game called Neon Knights, and I looked at the Kickstarter, and it really struck my fancy. So I reached out to him and said, "Do you want some short stories for this? Because I'm really enjoying what you got." And he says, "Yeah, sure." And again, do you how much do you want for it? And it's like, I don't care. I just want to write these stories. And he made a comic out of it and put it into the Kickstarter. And it's like,
oh, that's
nice.
so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a lot of fun, finding these little things. Now, don't get me wrong. It's really nice when I am paid. And if someone's offering me payment, I will take that. But a lot of the time, I just will do something because I like it and because it's struck a fancy.
Cool. Well, speaking of fiction, and speaking of musings upon writing and life, you know where I'm going?
I know where you're going with this.
That was a good segue right there. Tell us about fractal visions.
Fractal visions. You may have heard something over the last couple of years, a little pandemic going around, COVID, that kind of stuff. Yeah, I know,
Not
right?
familiar.
During that time, I started looking at what I was doing, and outside of my day job, which was, entirely focused on pandemic, being in healthcare and all that, I was looking at what people in the industry were doing, what people in the industry were struggling with. And a lot of the writers I knew, um, that they didn't have the income they were looking for. They were not getting the work. Everyone was struggling. There was pandemic vacancies in jobs and such. So I figured, what could I do? And I launched an idea that I had in the back of my head for a Savage Worlds campaign setting, and this eventually turned into a Kickstarter called New Bristol, and that was not something that I wanted to make money off of. And we did bring in some money, but all of that went into the artists and the writers that I involved. So I didn't see a profit for that, but I didn't intend to see a profit for that. So everything that came in went out. The books were published. They're now on Drive Through RPG. That's great, but that's not what I wanted. I wanted to get some funds into the writers team that I was working with, and it was the same team that I worked with for Rebel Minis, and we'd done some books there back pre-COVID times. I think there were about 5, 6 books that we put out. And they were all Savage Worlds. So I got a nice little team. We did some work. I did some line developing, that kind of stuff. And this one was kind of like a progression into my first self-publishing. So that's not answering your question about Fractal Visions, but it was the catalyst for it. As I was looking at what I could do, I saw that I had a significant amount of fiction that I'd been writing over the years, almost 30 years of published or unpublished work. So I figured, bucket lists being what it is, I might as well start putting some of this together. So I put it together using Kindle, using drive-through fiction, and learned some stuff along the lines of, I really don't know how to format. I'm horrible about that. And then started putting it out on Amazon, putting it out on drive-through RPG, just because I wanted to get it done and put these stories somewhere. And I had to reach out to John Zelensky and get a cover for Fractal Visions #1, which was one of his pieces of art, and I think it works really well.
Cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
I mean, Shadowrun being what it was, I thought it was important to have him on there, and of course, my dedication is to Nigel. When he did pass, I have always had in the back of my head that at some point I want to take a book that I'm proud of, that I think does him honor, that has some of the influence that I have drawn from what he used to teach me. And I want to take it down to False Creek. I want to find the bench that's dedicated to him, and I want to just leave the book there. That's a dream that I've always wanted to do. And I think
I love that.
I think I'm proud enough of this book. Although the next one I might be happy to do that with.
But you can always leave a stack on the bench.
I could. I don't know. Being a writer and a poet, because I have published some poetry. I don't know. Sometimes it makes you a little emotional about things like that. Put a little more relevance on legacy, friendship, that kind of stuff.
That's awesome.
Yep.
We're getting serious here on Gen Con TV.
I know, right? I didn't expect to get this emotional about that.
Well, I want to hear a little bit of about Interlinked.
Interlinked, nice. So I've been working with a publisher out of England. About the same time the COVID hit, about the same time the Brexit hit. So it's a challenge to do any kind of publishing in England. But they have a project called Carbon 2185. So it's basically taking a cyberpunk future with a few twists, dropping it into San Francisco, not Seattle, San Francisco, and using the Dungeons and Dragons 5e game platform for it. So Interlinked, I did see the Kickstarter. I reached out to the publisher and say, this looks cool. What would you like? And they said, well, I have some ideas about an adventure, and that's where Interlinked came from. So basically, it's a I don't want to give too much away, but it's very much taken what he asked for and what I turned it into. So if you think Blade Runner in a food production factory, that's kind of what you're going to see here. Yeah, yeah,
Excellent.
yeah.
Cool. All right. Now what about I wonder if there's anything that you're willing to share about the new Bristol campaign?
The new Bristol campaign, yes, it's available on Drive Through RPG. It's been there for a while.
It's already available. Oh,
Oh
it
yeah,
has been.
yeah,
I
it's
missed it.
been there. We fulfilled a Kickstarter, I think, last March, something like that.
Oh, okay.
So it's been there for a while. I'm not thrilled with the way it looks, but then it was just to get some money out there for the writers. But the content is great. So imagine that there is a 1950s city between Chicago and Toronto. And there's a magical spell that the superheroes are involved with at that time, which pulls it out of not just reality, but history. So this city is basically a rival to Detroit, and it just disappears. So there is a
Oh,
gap there, not only in the world, but in the history of the world and the perception of that area. So anyone that goes hiking in a specific area will come across the void, which is New Bristol, and then they'll forget about it. And then the spell starts to weaken, and then the city starts coming back, and that's where the initial adventure comes into play. So you were the superheroes that all of a sudden are starting to realize that something's off. Veterans will start remembering a battleship that they were stationed on, which none of the history books have. But I mean, where's this coming from? What are the superheroes going to do when memories start coming back to people that they never remembered? That kind of stuff. That's the initial adventure. And ultimately, what you're going to find out is that the city was thrown out of reality and has been traveling through various realities. And then, when it comes back, it brings part of them with it. So you've got cybernetics, you've got dinosaurs, you've got psionics, and within the campaign book, we have a city map. We have a full history from World War II on for this actual location. We've got a bunch of Savage Worlds characters. The main villain is Baron Faustus, so you can probably imagine where we drew him from, thinking, Faust and Doctor Doom and
yep.
the Red Skull. That's your that's the where he's come from, that kind of stuff. But also there's some locations where my version of the Fantastic Four lived, and there's bases that you can use, all that sort of stuff. Each of the little precincts of the city have their
Mhm.
own unique character. So it's actually a book I'm quite proud of.
Yeah, real stuck for a moment because I love cyberpunk and I
Yep.
love dinosaurs. I wanted to be a paleontologist growing up, but
Nice.
like having the two together, my brain just kind of like
Broke.
glitched for a moment there because it's like I don't like my food touching or something like that. Like, I don't know how I feel about cyberpunk and dinosaurs in one. I'm gonna have to stew
Well,
on that. And
I should also mention the industrial area of the city has a crashed spaceship, which can no longer fly anymore. So you've also got aliens in there. So there is a
oh,
lot in this world, and some of it is influenced by the work that I did with Eden Press on City of Heroes, that kind of stuff. And that's
man,
basically where I got the idea from.
what did Bristol ever do to you?
As a Canadian living close to Surrey, I see the names of English cities being drawn over here. So it felt like Bristol, it's where my family grew up, kind of that area. New Bristol, New York, Chicago. It just felt like something to drop right in there. Yeah.
Awesome.
It was
So
an exciting project.
that's really cool. I'm excited about that one. I'm gonna have to check that out. Um, so not only have you written fiction and for RPGs and all the content that we've talked about, but you've also had some experiencing writing for different forms of media like
Yeah.
screenplays.
Well, I know in
Dot
the
dot
intro you
dot.
did say I was involved with Star Trek. I
That's
do
the
need to
unofficial, right?
clarify. Yes, it's all fan films and such. So I've written a number of screenplays for a short-lived, I guess it was about 3 years. You can find it on YouTube, but it's called Star Trek: The Romulan Wars. So I wrote a number of screenplays there. The rules that CBS have, like CBS, Paramount, the rules are that you can only have a certain amount of budget. You can only do certain things. They can only be certain lengths. So that really reduces the amount of quality that you can have. Not that there's not
Right.
some brilliant work out there, some really high production quality and some values. That's not the team I was working with. Now I got to say that the scripts are solid. The passion is solid. Um, But if you're looking for Star Trek Strange New Worlds, it's not going to be that. It's going to be low budget, but it's going to be fun. Now,
Well, it's hard.
Mhm.
It's hard doing even making with low budget, making sci-fi and in space
Yeah.
films look good. It's hard because you're dealing with a lot of computer animation and graphics and stuff
Yeah.
like that. So
And I 100% applaud the ones out there like Farragut or Star Trek, the new Phase Two, I believe it was called, where they have these beautiful sets, where they have some really solid acting, and even Star Trek alumni like George Takei that have acted with them. Those are
cool.
brilliant, and they are great, and they are high value and solid scripts. Just love that kind of stuff. Robert Sawyer did their finale, and those are great. But that's not what I did. What I did do last year was work with a fellow down in the States, Colorado, Elliot Johnson, with his studio, Treble Peaks, and we did a fan film for Star Wars, and that one I really enjoyed. I think he's in
Cool.
editing right now, and the acting was just great. They really pulled in what I tried to get into the script, the drama, the emotion, and I'm really looking forward to that coming out. Not sure what the production values are going to look like, but in the writer's room, in the readings that they were doing, man, solid acting.
That's awesome. That's great to
Yeah.
hear. It's
Uh,
it's it's
it's Star Wars Remnants is what it's called,
oh,
and
okay.
I expect that should be out maybe by August. Yeah.
Okay. Pretty soon.
Yep.
It's neat to like the people that come together, like you said, the passion behind it. Like
Mm,
if you're working on a project like this, everyone's in love with that
yeah.
IP, that world, that the lore, the history, and so they're all going to bring 100% of their enthusiasm to it, and so it's really cool to be able to work with people like that. We did the Chicago Shadows trailer, which is a cyberpunk fantasy trailer for a series that takes place in the future at some point and has magic involved in it, but it is no way part of Shadow. Promise. But it's like bringing that together, doing the trailer. We did the Kickstarter for it. We raised
Mhm.
$15,000. Um, but everyone, the film crew, the writing, the acting, everyone worked for cheap, if not free,
Yeah.
because they were just excited about the project and wanted to see it happen.
Yeah.
And that's like there's an energy in the room when that happens.
Yeah, and these kind of creative works, like role-playing games, like writing, like publishing, it brings the passion. If the passion's not there, you feel it. And I don't think there's anyone I've written with that has not been passionate.
That's awesome. That's so cool. That's that's this industry, darn it.
It is. It really is.
So you got to give some advice already, um, a little bit earlier when we were talking about some of our musings, but do you have any other advice for people wanting to get into game design or writing? Where do they start?
Where do they start?
First, they get a notebook.
Yeah, you got to have a notebook. If you don't have a notebook, you can't move on. iPads won't
Like
cut it. It's
Steve
got to
from
be
Blue's
paper.
Clues, you got to have.
You have to have an idea that this is what you want to do, and you have to have an idea that this is where you want to go. So for me, it's thinking about where I want to go, what I want to do, and then reaching out to the people I want to work with. With role playing games, it's great because you can either look at a Kickstarter, you can see that there's something coming, and you can get in on the ground floor. Um, or you can see there's already something that is out there, and you can have an idea of what your format is, what they're looking for, and then what you can add to it. So for instance, something like Shadowrun, you know what the world is, you know where the areas are that can be developed, and you can see modules that have already been printed. You can get an idea of where the world needs to be filled in, and then you get an idea of what you can contribute to it, where you want to go with that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
having a blueprint of where you want to go and what you want to do, but also having a solid idea of what you can contribute. It's going to pay off dividends, especially when you go to people and you start talking to them. When I started when I started writing, I did it cold. My first book was Northwest Passage, and it was a cold pitch to Atlas Games. I reached out to John Nephew and said, "This is my idea, and this is what I want to do, and this is what I provided for him." And so basically, the idea is that it's a Shadowrun, but it's Cyberpunk 2020, which I love that game. Solid system. And basically, it's an adventure that's gone wrong with an extraction that needs to happen in Alaska. So what I took was the world that they had, found a twist that no one had done before, and then provided him a chapter by chapter breakdown of what the adventure would look like. Having that prepared so that he knew what I was looking for, what my hook was, what my elevator pitch, if you will, was. He decided, okay, this is great. I'm going to take a chance with you. Give me the first chapter, the first prologue in the idea, and then we'll move from there. So I sent that to him. He said, great, let's do the book. And then I basically did it. Now, this was pre-internet. I'm writing from the sunny Okanagan about Alaska. So a lot of my research involved reaching out through mail, no less, to the Nome, Alaska Chamber of Commerce and saying, "Do you have maps? Do you have any idea what kind of businesses are there? Can you tell me something about Alaska?" That sort of stuff. It was
Wow.
so labor intensive. One of the best books that I've ever written because I put a good 3 months of research into that. Whereas, I
Wow.
mean, people nowadays, you could probably do that in an afternoon. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
The
But being
world's the times
prepared
are
and
changing.
oh yeah, for sure. I mean, it's great the amount of access that people have and not having to mail floppy disks to White Wolf with your manuscript on
Oh,
it. Yeah. Yeah.
that hurt.
It certainly did. But be prepared, have your pitch, and know what you can contribute when you go to the publishers. And if you can go to something like a Gen Con or an Origins or a Gamma trade show, and you can talk to the people and know who you're talking to, um, pretty much guarantee you'll be able to get something in there if you've got the skill to
Awesome.
carry through with it. Yeah. I mean,
I agree with
my
that completely.
Yeah, my first professional publishing was Challenge Magazine. Wrote a little thing for Shadowrun with shamanic totems, new ones, Raven, Deer, that kind of stuff. That was the first thing I ever got published. Yeah, and
Awesome.
those are the other venues that you can look at. There's not so much a print media per se anymore, but there are areas where you can take a little idea, kick it out there, throw it on your resume, and have something that people can look at.
Cool. Awesome. Are you going to Gen Con this year?
It has been decades since I've been to conventions. I think having a family has, and my wife and child are not gamers, so that they don't really.
Oh,
I mean, occasionally over dinner, my wife will ask, "So what are you thinking? What's going through your head? How was your day? That kind of stuff." And she will get this rambling adventure idea, or honey, I've got a question. What do you think the temperature difference between lunar shade and lunar sun? Can you use that with piping to be able to make liquid oxygen and have it compressed into fuel just by passing it through? And I mean, she zones out by the second sentence.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Well, in the last couple minutes here, is anything else exciting coming down the pipeline you can tell us about?
Um, I'm working on a new adventure with Carbon 2185, so I'm not sure when the release date for that is, but that's going to be coming out quickly. I've just done something with Lewis Porter and his Superverse adventure stuff. What else am I doing? There's the novel, which that's occupying a lot of my time. And other than that, I mean, you can watch what I have on my Amazon page, Facebook page, or Amazon authors page. Facebook, I can be found as Andrew J. Lucas. I am really hoping that I'm going to be able to get a story published with B Cubed Press. It's more political, science fiction kind of stuff. I've done a couple of things with them. So I'm hoping I'll be able to qualify for their next anthology. And I got to say, the last one I was in, one of the co-writers was David Gerald and Mike Resnick. And that just being in the same book with them, I mean, I'm still high from that.
Right?
Yeah,
Oh,
I know.
oh, the amount of fanning out in this industry is super cool. And for me, like I tend to I I remember people based on experiences and talking to them. I'm not
Yeah.
very good at like, oh, we've talked a couple times and I remember what we talked about, or like on online or anything like that. But like those experiences are what make me remember people. So I'll be speaking with someone and then realize who I'm actually speaking to, and I'm like, oh my,
Oh yeah, yeah.
oh dear.
Yeah, I know. It's great. And if you could go through life with a little bit of a little bit of trail of credits and people knowing who you are and what you've done, I mean, that just makes it all worth it.
Really does. So say one more time, where can we find you and follow you to hear more about what you're working on?
I would say my Facebook page, Andrew J. Lucas, and then the same thing on Amazon. Amazon has links to some of the books that I have been published in, so it gives you a pretty broad overview of what I do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It was lovely speaking with you. I had several of those moments where I'm just like, I don't care about my script. Just go ahead and just tell stories.
I do enjoy
uh,
hearing myself talk.
well, you've got a lot of great stories and experiences and insight, and it was just delightful talking to you. And please, next time you have anything dropping that you want to promote or anything like that, you want to come back on and talk to us all about it, please do. But thank you again so much.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Now, Rem PCs, don't you go anywhere because we are going to be right back. Hi, everyone. Don't forget that we have a wonderful giveaway of PDF copies of two Fractal Visions books, which we talked about on today's show. Thank you so much to Andrew for donating such a cool prize. You can type hashtag RemPC in the chat for your free entry to win. And don't forget to donate bits and subscribe to the channel for bonus entries. All funds help us to pay our cast and crew and keep producing content. You can also pick up t-shirts and merch at our Etsy store at remalternis.com/Etsy. Now, thank you all for joining. Emerald Glitch is coming up next, and we'll see you next time, RemPCs. Bye.